So that we are recording here. Welcome to this very special event today where we honor the primate guardians, individuals and groups who donated at least $100 to the American Society of Primatologists initiative titled Saving Primates Where They Live. We had a goal of $25,000 and ended up raising $28,000. So thanks to everyone for the generosity. I'm Bert Covert, professor of anthropology at the University of Colorado Boulder and co-chair of the American Society of Primatologists Conservation Committee. With my co-chair, Dr. Jennifer Kramer, and my predecessor, Dr. Marilyn Norconk, I'm pleased to host this event. The title of today's event is Karisoke Today, Meet the Researchers Who Continue Dian Fossey's work to study and protect mountain gorillas and their habitat. I anticipate that all in attendance are familiar with Dian Fossey's work with mountain gorillas and the Dian Fossey Gorillas Fund that continues Diana's work up to the present. And this includes broadly the daily protection of mountain gorillas and their habitats, scientific research on gorillas, their habitats, their conservation, and other animals and plants in their habitats, training conservationists, and working with local communities. In sum, the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund is a world-renowned leader in gorilla conservation. During the next 40 minutes or so, we will hear from 4 members of the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund's team, after which we'll have time for questions and answers. Feel free to enter questions into the chat function, and after the presentations, we'll also encourage the audience to use the raise hand function to ask questions of the speakers. It's now my distinct pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Tara Stoyanski. Dr. Stoyanski is the president, CEO, and chief scientific officer of the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. Before being appointed CEO in 2014, she worked with the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund for more than a decade in a scientific role. Tara is an expert on gorillas with more than 20 years of research experience. She's authored more than 100 scientific publications and books. Her work has been featured in numerous press outlets.
That is correct. So I wanted to make sure.
She's authored more than 100 scientific publications and books. Her work has been featured in numerous press outlets, including National Geographic Magazine, CNN, NPR, and 60 Minutes. She holds degrees from Tufts University, University of Oxford, and the Georgia Institute of Technology as an adjunct professor at Emory University. Dr. Stoyanski also serves in several leadership positions within the conservation, primate, and academic communities. Today, she will speak about where Karisoke is today and will introduce their new campus. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Tara Stoyanski to today's event. We could all clap at this moment. And I can say, take it away, Tara.
Great. Thank you very much, Bert, and thanks for that very nice introduction. And it's really wonderful to see so many familiar names and some faces up here. It feels like it's been ages since I've seen many of you through COVID and everything else. So it's a huge honor to be here today. Thank you so much for asking our team to speak. I'm very excited to be joined. I'm going to share my screen quickly by several of my colleagues. So sorry, one second. Up. Here we go. I'm not sharing the right screen. Sorry. I'm not seeing my presentation for some reason, which is very odd. Why is that? We did a check early on, and of course, everything worked great. And I told Bert not to jinx us, that we would run into some issue later on. But let's see here. We got it. Now we got it. Wonderful. So it's really an honor to be able to be joined today. I'm going to let my colleagues introduce themselves when they actually give their presentations. But we do have Winnie, who's joining us here from Germany. She's actually based out of Karisoke, but is in Germany at the moment. And then my colleagues, Honorine and Eric, who are joining us from our facility in Rwanda. And as Bert mentioned, I know that you guys are familiar with Dian Fossey and her history, so I won't spend too much time talking about that, but she started this work originally in 1967. So we are now approaching 55 years on the ground studying mountain gorillas and also protecting them, which is pretty amazing. And what started as very humble beginnings up in the volcanoes in Rwanda is now an organization. This is actually an old photo, but we are now quite a large organization. We are roughly 300 staff operating out of 3 countries. So we have a small team here in Atlanta that basically is our fundraising and PR and finance team. And then we are 150 staff in Rwanda, our original footprint. And for the last 22 years, we've also been working in the Eastern Democratic Republic of the Congo to protect and study the close cousin of the mountain gorillas, Grauer's gorillas. And we are a staff of roughly 150 on that side as well. So quite a big team on the ground. And in fact, we're proud of the fact that we are considered the world's longest running and largest organization dedicated entirely to the study and conservation of gorillas. And Bert gave you a quick overview of kind of our model of conservation, but we have a short video that I just wanted to share with the group that talks about the work that we do and is introduced by our director in Rwanda, Felix Ndagijimana.
Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund International is dedicated to the conservation and protection of gorillas and the habitats in Africa. To be able to accomplish our mission, we have developed an integrated conservation model which has 4 pillars. The first one is daily protection. Daily protection is done through the presence of our staff in the park. So we have trackers who go to the park 365 days a year. Their work is basically to monitor the gorillas, to follow each and every gorilla groups that we are in charge of. Also, we have 2 dedicated anti-poaching teams who are in the forest also every day, removing snares and other threats to gorillas and other animals of the park. Second one is scientific research. We are the world's longest running research center. We have been studying mountain gorillas for over 50 years. Our research work doesn't focus only on the gorillas, but also biodiversity of the park. So we want to be able to understand the gorillas and their ecosystem. The information that comes out of the research that we do really informs conservation policies in this country. Pillar number 3 is training of future conservation leaders. We're able to reach over 400 students from higher learning institutions in Rwanda. The work that we do is basically to provide skills to young scientists that would really enable them to continue the work of the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. Our 4th pillar is helping communities. This is important because we know effective conservation requires support of local communities. We work closely with communities who live close to the gorilla habitat, and we support their education, health, and also provide alternatives, because some of these communities are affected by poverty and they depend on park resources. So we want to be able to provide alternatives so that they don't go in the park. It is such a great honor to be the first Rwandan director of Karisoke Research Center, to follow in the footsteps of Dian Fossey and all these other great scientists, all these other great conservationists. But I'm not the only Rwandan who works at Karisoke Research Center. In fact, 98% of all our staff are Rwandan.
That talks a little bit just about our general approach to gorilla research and conservation. And obviously gorillas are the centerpiece of the work that we do. And what's really amazing, and I know all of you who work in this field understand the value of long-term field sites, is the type of research that we can continue to do on gorillas because of the length of the data set that we have. So we still use a lot of Dian Fossey's original techniques of being out and recording social behavior, feeding behavior, ranging behavior, but also are using modern technologies, which you'll hear a little bit about today in terms of genetics, physiology, and areas like that. Still a lot of things to learn about gorillas. These are just some of the press coverage from papers that came out within the last year, looking at the function of chest beats and showing that these are actually honest communication signals about male quality, looking at what the effects are of having a growing gorilla population with a habitat that is quite small and not growing, and the effects that that's having on overall population growth rates. We published a paper that is found very different results from many of the other long-term studies of animals like killer whales, elephants, and chimps, showing that when gorilla infants lose their mothers, they actually are not at a significant disadvantage, but because of the role that the dominant silverback plays in taking care of them, as well as the overall cohesive group structure of gorillas, they're really buffered from a lot of the negative consequences of losing their mom. So this is just some of the work that we're continuing to do. And again, really the long-term data set is what enables us to look at these trends over time. But as it was mentioned in the presentation, gorillas are just a part of the work that we do. You're going to hear today about these lovely little critters, golden monkeys, which are the only other primates that are in Volcanoes National Park with the gorillas. We've been studying them now for almost 2 decades, and we're influential in helping to habituate them, and they're now used for both research as well as for tourism. But we also study the ecosystem as a whole. One of the things that we've learned is that, like humans, gorillas are not necessarily good canaries in the coal mine for the overall health of their ecosystem, because they're intelligent, they have broad, flexible diets, they're not reliant on one particular location for breeding or for raising their offspring. So we really need to be monitoring that whole ecosystem to study the health. So we look at large mammals like elephants and buffalo, amphibians, which are great indicator species of the health of the ecosystem, birds, also wonderful indicator species, and even humans. A significant part of our research is looking at the human side of conservation, so studying how our work to train future leaders or intervene in local communities, the effects that that's having. And in the last 5 years, over 20% of the publications that we've produced have actually been on species other than gorillas. So a much broader research focus than originally what might have been at Karisoke. And that leads to another big area of our research focus, which was mentioned in the video, and that is building the next generation of conservation leaders. This is one of our brand new labs we're extremely excited about, but this is a huge commitment of the Fossey Fund. We have more than 20 Rwandan staff scientists on our team. We also work very closely with universities in Rwanda. We bring over 400 University of Rwanda students up to our facility each year, taking them out into the field, teaching them basic conservation biology, primatology, history of the region, etc. And I really want to thank this group of people, because I know that part of the reason you're on this webinar is that you contributed to ASP's fund to help support in-country scientists. And this is obviously a very important area for us all to be working in. So thank you for your contribution to that. But we're incredibly proud that with our new campus, we will be able to really expand this work. So we've gone from 1 classroom to 4 large classrooms and lots of meeting space on our new facility. We've gone from 1 laboratory to 5 laboratories. We have fume hoods and freezer space, and it's really going to be a transformational location for us to be doing this work of training future leaders in conservation. It's called the Ellen DeGeneres campus of the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund. This is a photo of it. We also were able to move since the 1990s. We have been located far from the forest. It's about a 40-minute drive up to the groups that we work with. So we've moved up adjacent to the park again. So we're back near the gorillas, near the communities we serve. And it really is a true campus. So you can see here, there are multiple buildings, and you've got this beautiful view in the background. Right here is where the original Karisoke would have been located, in between Bisoke and Karisimbi volcanoes. This is Makeno, which is the volcano that's located in the Congo. And just to give you another shot, now we're looking in the other direction. So you've got the other 3 volcanoes here, Morabora, Gahinga, and Sabino. And the facility has multiple buildings. So we have a conservation gallery, which is really set up as a public exhibit. So it's meant for local communities and tourists to come through and learn more about gorillas, about conservation, about our work. We have an education center that has those classrooms that I talked about, as well as a science library and computer lab. Research center, so this is where our labs are located, as well as the offices of the team. We have student housing on site. So previously, when we would host students, they would stay in local hotels. Now we have housing so they can be integrated with our staff and visiting scientists. And then we planted over 250,000 native plants on the campus to really create a living laboratory, so we could bring biodiversity back to this former agricultural space and have students be able to be on site and actually studying plants and ecosystems on the campus, as well as being able to go in the park. And so the last thing I wanted to show you, this is a trailer we actually released, I think, last week, which just kind of gives an overview, a high-level overview of the campus in general that I thought you might enjoy seeing.
This is our campus. It's a day that we have been looking forward to for so many years. So it's very exciting that we're now here.
Hi, my name is Kadiara Kingai and I'm the gallery manager. Welcome to the Cindy Broda Conservation Gallery.
I think so far the people who've been coming in have been like, wow, like there's so much to see and there's so many different exciting things to do.
My favorite place was the theater because I have never visited mountain gorillas myself.
It's completely unique in terms of the high tech combined with where it is in the world.
I'm most proud about the furniture that shows the handcraft of Rwanda. So actually the signature of the craftsmen.
My all-time favorite place is the nursery. It's very quiet. You see birds, you see butterflies. The plants are growing well.
Iki kigo cyaziye igihe kuko ni ikigo kizadufasha twe nk'abarezi kugira ngo tubone umwanya n'uburyo bwo gusobanurira abana twigisha ibijyanye no kubungabunga ibidukikije, ariko n'abakuru bazagira amahirwe yo gusobanukirwa neza ibibera mu ishyamba.
This is a one-of-a-kind building here in Rwanda which will attract people to come and learn more about gorillas.
It's going to be quite a proud moment to sit back and say, we did this.
So with that, I always say, as someone that started in this field as a primatologist, that if you would have told me 20 years ago that I would be building a campus halfway around the world during a global pandemic, I would have said absolutely no way. But we're really thrilled. This was a 2-year construction program on the ground. We opened on February 1st, and I hope that you will all come visit. We are excited about partnerships. We're excited about having PhD students come and work with us. So looking forward to hopefully having the primatological community as part of this amazing facility. So with that, I would love to turn it over to my colleagues. I think we're going to start with Dr. Winnie Eckhart, who is the research manager at Karisoke and has been with us for quite some time, since actually starting as a research assistant, started as a research assistant in 2004. So Winnie, I'm going to turn it over to you. Yep, you're muted, Winnie.
All right, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you're joining us. I'm gonna start sharing my screen. And I hope it's working as during our practice. Can you see my screen?
We can, Winnie, yep.
Perfect. All right, so I would like to share with you key findings on 1 decade of monitoring stress physiology in the Virunga mountain gorillas and some future steps. But before, oh, my screen is not moving. Oh la la. My screen doesn't want to move. Oops. Okay, now we are moving. Sorry for this. So please let me first explain how I actually joined the Fossey Fund and gorilla conservation. So as Tara said, I joined in 2004 and I was a research assistant and collected the behavior long-term data. And while I was there, the opportunity came up to conduct a PhD research with Dr. Alison Fletcher, which you can see on this photo. And she also conducted her PhD back in the early 90s, also on the very same gorilla population on social development. And I could extend her work and look closer at mother-offspring relationships. And after, I got very much interested into poop and why poop is so cool and what we can do with it. This is going to be a focus of my presentation. So first, let me talk a bit in general about wildlife physiology. Integrating hormone analysis into wildlife conservation research and monitoring is a very powerful and widely accepted approach because hormones provide a precise and direct measure of animals' physiological condition. And because we can measure non-invasively the end products of stress response in feces. So the mountain gorillas are the only great ape that's actually recovering in the wild. And the Virunga population recovered from a low of 260 to 290 individuals in 1973 to 604 in 2016. And this is a unique conservation success story, but it also comes with some new challenges for this population. A subpopulation, which we often refer to as the Karisoke research population, is ranging in a forest area where we saw the highest population growth until 2010 within the Virunga population. And that really had remarkable consequences for the subpopulation social organization and also for the dynamics. And that's very well summarized in this figure, and I'm gonna guide you through this. So here on the y-axis, you see the groups, and they are represented by horizontal lines, and their thickness shows the group size. And what you can see, for over 10 years, we only had 3 groups which are very stable, and they were growing in size, and we had an increasing number of silverbacks in these groups. And when these silverbacks, the dominant silverback turned old, he was challenged by the younger silverbacks, and that brought a lot of instability in these groups, and that happened in about 2007. And as a consequence, we observed a series of group splits and new formation of groups, which led to many more groups in the same forest area. And these groups were smaller. We had less silverbacks in these groups, and we saw a 3 times increase of the group density in the area where we study gorillas. And this increase had remarkable consequences. For example, the group interactions increased 3-fold. And because groups were meeting more often, females had more opportunities to change groups, which you see here through these black vertical lines. And we also saw a 5 times increase in infanticide, which is indicated by these red asterisks here. And of course, we were wondering, what does that mean for these gorillas, since we observed these changes in 2007? But there were also other potential stressors we were concerned about, or we wanted to investigate further. So for example, the mountain gorillas, what their name says already, no other gorilla subspecies found at higher elevations. So that exposed them to a wide range of temperature, which can drop below 0 at night. And there's a lot of rain in the mountains. Mountain gorillas also are exposed to high anthropogenic pressure from a poor and very dense population very close by, as Tara already mentioned. And these gorillas are daily visited by a high number of human visitors, including tourists, park staff, protection staff, researchers, and vets. So we were interested in what are actually the key stresses for these gorillas. And we wanted to integrate stress physiology and monitoring into our long-term monitoring programs of these gorillas. And we were also interested in investigating the link between behavior and stress and build regional scientific capacity. So we find the research population in the southwest of the Volcanoes National Park on the random side of the Virunga Massif, which is also shared between Congo and Uganda. And we collected since over 16,000 fecal samples for the analysis of hormones, and to really develop a full appreciation what effort is behind to collect a single fecal sample. We prepared a little time lapse for you from the forest back to our labs where we work with these samples. And I'm gonna guide you through this. So mountain gorillas are herbivores and they eat a lot, over 16 pounds a day, and that makes them also very good poop donors. And as soon as they drop the fecal samples, our field staff is collecting a subsample and labels it with the name of the gorilla, the group, the date, and the time it was collected, and they store it in a cooling bag to transport it down to the nearest village where our, we call sometimes Poop Express, is waiting. And he will bring the samples to our laboratories. And they are about 10 to 20 minutes apart. This is still our old office. We are not yet at the campus here. And once it arrives there, Rose Umahosa is taking over. She's our lab coordinator and has worked with over 16,000 samples so far. So she writes down all the details for each sample and first freezes all samples until we extract hormones. So the day we extract them, we defreeze them, and we have to first remove 0.5 gram of fecal material from other fiber and berries, everything gorillas eat and we don't want to have. And once we have that fecal material, we mix it with ethanol, which is the key step to extract hormones, and we homogenize it. And then we filter it through this filter paper, and the extract on the bottom of this tube. This is where we find our hormone extracts. And once the ethanol has been evaporated, we cup these tubes and they're ready to go to our partner labs in the US, where we then analyze the sample with cortisol enzyme immunoassays. And we also
Sorry, Winnie, you sort of froze for a minute and it looks like your screen stopped sharing.
Oh la la. Okay, let me go back. I'm sorry for that.
If you run into the issue again, I have it here, so I can always pull it up here.
All right. You can see my screen again?
Yep.
Perfect. Great. Good. So I don't know where I lost you, but I continue here. I hope that's the right spot. So we also collected over 370 hours of behavior data and looked mainly at behavior that have been shown in other primates that they are linked to stress, like scratching, yawning. But we also looked at gorillas putting the 1 or 2 hands on their head, which often is observed when gorillas are sick, so obviously in pain, or when it's cold. Now it's not moving again, like at the beginning. Let's see. All right, sorry, short delay. You can still hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
Winnie, just to make sure you're clicking on the PowerPoint itself to move forward, right?
I press, yeah, it should. All right, here. All right, let's good. I hope that was the last interruption. So what we first needed to do is to actually find out if our lab and field protocols are working. So are we actually really measuring stress in these fecal samples? So for that, we used very aggressive interactions between group where we thought they must be very stressful because they can lead to the death of gorillas and severe injuries. So here you see the hormone profile of 6 gorillas which belong to a group that interact with another group at day 0. And we collected sample before and during and after the interactions. And what we found is that really between day 1 and 5, we saw a steep elevation of stress levels up to 8-fold to the baseline levels before the interactions. So we could show our methods work. So next, we were interested in how do social factors and ecological factors, how are they impacted by stress? And you have seen before that there were remarkable changes within this population. The social environment has changed dramatically. But what we found actually it really had very little impact on their stress levels. So variation in group size, group type, the number of neighboring groups, number of inter-unit encounters, and also a variation in home range size overlap between groups didn't impact much the stress of these gorillas. However, we found that the exclusive home range group uses, so it's not used by any other group, if that exclusive range decreased, we saw elevation in stress. So that suggests if the group density in the park increases as the population increases, this might likely lead to a higher stress because each group will have less space available to themselves. If we looked at ecological factors, we found, or our findings suggest, that climate change, that these gorillas might be more sensitive to climate change than previous research actually suggested, because we found an increase in baseline stress levels in months with higher rainfall and with higher maximum temperatures. And we also looked at the relationships between those three behaviors and stress, and we didn't find anything actually. So we need to keep looking for other behaviors which might help us to detect stress without fecal samples on just by pure observations in future. So talking about the future, what do we want to do if in the next decade? So we would like to investigate other potential stressors, and we also want to better understand the direct effect increasing temperature have on the gorilla physiology through a heat study. We would like to explore the link between measures of health and stress, because if you're chronically exposed to stress, this might affect your health. And we want to explore the link between social behavior and the social role of gorillas and stress, and whether social flexibility in gorillas is mediated by stress responses. So for example, if a female decides to change the group, is it influenced by the stress level that female experienced in the current group? And finally, the new Ellen DeGeneres campus of the Fossey Fund provides us purpose-built labs, including an endocrinology lab, which will help us to transfer our hormone analysis from the US to Rwanda. So we're very excited about this. And finally, and importantly, I would like to thank the Rwandan government and Rwanda Development Board for their long-term support. And we're also very grateful to multiple field and lab teams for their tireless efforts. And very importantly, to all funding sources who supported us, and without who this long-term project wouldn't have been possible. And I thank you for your patience and for bearing with me with the little technical problems we faced. And
great, thank you so much, Winnie.
I would like to hand over.
Oh, go ahead. You're going to turn it over to Honorine?
Yes, I think. Or do you want to say some words to the shift to Honorine?
I don't see her on here. Honorine, are you ready? There she is. All right.
Yeah.
We'll introduce one of our research assistants who's calling in from our new campus in Rwanda. Take it away, Honorine.
Yeah, thank you, Tara, for a small presentation and the welcoming me. I'm now sharing my screen. Are you seeing the screen?
Yes.
Okay, let me just start by introducing myself. I am Honorine Ihimbazwe. I'm Rwandan. I've been working with the Fossey Fund since 2018, where I was doing my bachelor's degree at the University of Rwanda, and I was given an opportunity to do my bachelor's thesis in the Fossey Fund. And then after I was given a professional internship and hired as full-time research assistant in 2019. My work is concerned with collecting field data, behavior on mountain gorillas, and I also do support in processing the data for scientific research and for conservation of mountain gorillas. I'm really glad to be here tonight. It's already evening in Rwanda. And I'm going to be presenting on the great variation in feeding ecology of mountain gorillas in the Volcanoes National Park. So I'm welcoming you to listening to me, and I'm so thankful for this great time to share with you our study. So let me go on. Oops. So as a small introduction, the intrapopulation variation in the feeding ecology can markedly affect the population growth rates in mountain gorillas. And as you may know, the Virunga mountain gorilla population has been increasing. The recent numbers were published in 2016 as mountain gorillas are 604 individuals in the Virunga Massif. But the growth differences within the subpopulations receiving daily protection remain a speculation. So on this map, it's showing the Virunga Massif divided into 3 countries, Rwanda, DRC, and Uganda, with their respective national parks. And the Virunga Massif is made of a different altitudinal range. Because of that, there is a difference in vegetation zones, and that vegetation zone difference may affect food availability in these different vegetation zones. So that could explain the difference observed in population growth. However, most research in the mountain gorillas was only stemming on the population living in this southwest part, which have been showing high growth rates until 2010, and very little was known about the population living in the northwestern of the Volcanoes National Park, northeast of the Volcanoes National Park, which have been showing the slow growth rates. So that led to a collaborative study between the RDB, Rwandan Development Board, and the Fossey Fund, and the study was aiming to expand mountain gorillas feed research to groups that are ranging in different mosaics in the Volcanoes National Park. And the study wanted to assess the time spent feeding and moving and the diet of mountain gorillas in the 2 subpopulations, and also see the habitat use. We also wanted to compare the diet between the 2 subpopulations. So in this study, we included 9 groups in the southwest and also took 3 groups in the northeast for comparison between the 2 subpopulations. And we collected the feeding behavior data. We focused on food plant species consumed by gorillas and their respective plant parts consumed. And then we have been looking on the group's location by taking GPS points. And then after we looked at their characterized vegetation zones in which groups were ranging. So how do our preliminary results look like? As you can see on this slide, the vegetation zones and the habitats used by gorilla groups in the 2 subpopulations have been observed to be different, as you can see shown by these figures in different groups. Looking at the diet diversity, we have also seen some differences. Like you can see in this table, looking at the feeding times, the time spent feeding by gorilla groups, you can see that it was uniform between groups along the Volcanoes National Park. But contrary to the time spent moving, we have marked that the gorilla groups in the eastern subpopulation have been moving somehow moving a lot than the other part of the park. We also looked at the diet diversity in these 2 subpopulations, and we have found a difference between the 2 subpopulations with higher diet diversity in the northeastern groups. This table is showing the top 5 key food species consumed by gorillas. These are the food liked by gorillas in the 2 subpopulations, and you can see that there is a great variation in this plant these are favored by the southwestern, while these ones are consumed mostly by those in the other part of the park. You can see that it's totally different, only they are overlapping here and somewhere here, only that. So we also calculated some overlapping indices, and we have found that there was little overlapping between groups ranging in different subpopulations, those marked in orange. You can see that it's least overlap, while in the gorilla groups belonging to the same subpopulation, it is marking that they had high overlaps. We also analyzed the home range size utilization, and we have found that the percentage of vegetation zones used by gorillas each month did not predict the home range size, even though the vegetation zones utilization was different among groups. So our preliminary findings have shown that the vegetation zone utilization and diet composition vary greatly among Volcanoes National Park groups, and the diet strongly increases in the groups from southwest to northeast. And this might be caused by the high tree abundance in the mixed forest and the mixed bamboo, which can add a volume to the home range of gorillas and then allow them to have a great space to explore and find food. But surprisingly, the vegetation zone utilized by gorillas did not predict monthly home range size, and the time spent moving was remarkably uniform among groups. But in the northeast, we have observed that the gorillas have been moving a lot than the gorillas in the southwest. So what are the next steps to this study or this project? As I may say, it's just a starting. We are just beginning to know much about gorillas, and we are willing to do it more and more to know better gorillas. So we are willing to increase the feeding observations in the northeast groups and then assess the nutritional analysis for comparison with those in the southwest. Then compare the intervals and the feeding development study across the two subpopulations. We also want to investigate food distribution of the key food consumed by those two subpopulations. So we cannot end the talk about this study without talking about two broader implications, which are that the research across the Volcanoes National Park will build a more comprehensive knowledge about mountain gorilla feeding ecology and help to understand population dynamics. And we also expect that the new knowledge will provide fundamental data for future gorilla food biomass assessment and help to plan the habitat expansion for gorillas, because as this study has shown, it will be very good to select plants to be planted for reforestation carefully by location. So we acknowledge the help of the Rwandan government and the Rwandan Development Board. We are also grateful to the field teams who help us to make this come true. And then we are also grateful to different sources of funding who support this project. I also thank you for your kind attention and patience and your time tonight to allow me to talk to you about gorillas. Thank you so much.
And thank you. Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
Yes, thanks very much, Honorine. And I think it was really, it was so interesting to us to see this incredible variability across the park in what gorillas were eating, and then the implications that that has for population growth rates, as Honorine mentioned, park expansion. And to realize that while we have so much data on mountain gorillas, it's really from one small subset of the park. And you could see in those vegetation map, zone maps, that the vegetation zones really vary. On the Congolese side, it's almost completely different vegetation zones than what we see in Rwanda. So lots more interesting studies there, and I'm very excited for Honorine to be continuing in those areas. Our next speaker is Eric. Eric is going to be talking to us about some of his master's research that he did looking at golden monkeys. So Eric, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Tara, for your introducing me. Let me share my screen here. Can you see my slides?
We can yeah, now we can. Perfect.
Yeah. Hi again, everyone. My name is Eric Daishimie. I'm a research assistant for the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund since 2015. But my history with the Fossey Fund goes back in 2009 when I was a bachelor student at the University of Rwanda. I was then given an opportunity to do my bachelor thesis with the Fossey Fund through its memoir program. And very recently, it was 2 years after I was hired, I was also given another opportunity to do a master's in the UK at the University of Chester. And actually, the research findings I'm sharing with you today are from my master's research project. And it's my pleasure to share the findings with you. In our research, we investigated human-wildlife conflict in golden monkeys of the Volcanoes National Park. A little bit introduction on human-wildlife conflict is crop raiding is one of the main causes of human-wildlife conflict, challenging conservationists worldwide, and primates are frequent raiders in many protected areas. Crop raiding negatively affects not only farmers' livelihoods, but also the conservation of involved primate species. So why golden monkeys? First, golden monkeys are endangered. Second, they remain only in two isolated populations. One population is in Ishwati Mukura National Park, and the other population is in the Virunga Massif, you can see on this map. And our study focused only on golden monkeys of the Volcanoes National Park on Rwandan side. This is an area photo of a part of the Volcanoes National Park. As you can see on this photo, the Volcanoes Park edges are directly adjacent to farmlands and a dense and poor human population that relies mainly on subsistence agriculture. In the Volcanoes National Park, golden monkeys inhabit the bamboo zone, which is nearest to the park boundary, and no record of golden monkeys crop raiding exists until at least the mid-90s. However, recent studies list golden monkeys as the second raiders after buffaloes. Moreover, golden monkeys challenge the existing mitigation measures. As you can see on this photo, we have this stone wall that separates the park to the two fields, and the golden monkeys can easily jump over the wall and grab some potatoes on the field. So as human-wildlife conflict usually present a complicated problem, thus a combination of approaches is recommended to get a comprehensive understanding of human-wildlife conflict scenarios and to plan for effective interventions. So we thus used an integrated approach to investigate to which extent golden monkeys crop raiding affect a farmer's livelihood and the conservation of the monkey, and to seek for alternative mitigation measures. In our approach, we used a structured survey that involved 45 farmers around the park. We also organized a workshop with conservation stakeholders of the Volcanoes National Park, and also observed monkeys to compare the behaviors when they were foraging inside the park and when they were foraging on farmlands. Finally, we tried a case observation experiment to see if we can discourage monkeys from raiding on potatoes. So what were our findings? we found that 95% of the survey participants had experienced potato loss to golden monkeys. And 36% had used potentially harmful methods to stop raiding monkeys, like some farmers were stoning the monkeys while on farmland. And a few cases of adverse impact on monkeys were described, like some monkeys were injured by farmers. During our workshop, we discussed different measures, and crop guarding was perceived as the most effective mitigation measure. You can wonder how is guarding done. This is a small hut here on this photo, and down here is a potato field. And how guarding is done, a farmer comes and stays in this small hut, looking around. He can go out and see if there are monkeys jumping out of the park and chase them back before they go in his potato field. This is how basically guarding is done. During our workshop, it was recommended that guarding needs to be improved through the government support, and also the guarding needs to be properly organized in cooperatives. Monkeys were less social when they were outside the park. They vocalized less, they self-groomed less, the infant suckled less, and more importantly, monkeys were more vigilant when on farmland compared to when they were inside the park. This suggesting high level of perceived risk by monkeys when foraging on farmland. During the test aversion experiment we tried, we used chili oil and potatoes. So the potatoes smeared with chili oil were put outside the park on in the field, as you can see on this experimental area design here. Monkeys did not eat potatoes smeared with chili oil. They fed on unattended leftover potatoes instead. This is suggesting that the smell of chili could potentially deter monkey from eating crops. I would like to share with you a bit of what happened during our experiment. As you can see in this video, golden monkeys love potatoes too much that they can dig under the ground to find them. However, see what happened when we were doing our experiment. This is a monkey that visited the experimental area. Here he is on a spot where there were potatoes smeared with chili oil. He picked the first potato, gave it a shallow bite, and discarded it. Chewed for a few times. He picked a second potato, only sniffed at it, then discarded it, and ignored the third potato on the ground. So the monkey went away, carried on feeding on leftover potatoes that were not attended by chili and grasses, and always avoiding potatoes that were smeared with chili oil, as you will see in this video. As chili potatoes were not eaten in most cases, it is unclear how aversive the chili taste is to the golden monkeys. Therefore, we recommend that future studies are needed to investigate the potential of aversion to chili odor and or taste, perhaps in a different form, such as chili powder that could be easily distributed over crops. This may not be a successful method to prevent crop raiding in the field. However, the avoidance behavior observed, I mean the golden monkeys avoiding those potatoes that were smeared with chili oil, as you can see again in this video, suggests that the use of chili could be successfully applied as a deterrent within potato storage in areas around the Volcanoes National Park, where golden monkeys are known to break into farmers' houses searching for harvested potatoes. So in conclusion, the survey outcomes and the behavioral changes shown by monkeys in farmland indicated that crop raiding by monkeys around the Volcanoes National Park can negatively affect both monkey conservation and farmers' livelihood. So overall, our multifaceted approach showed that the existing mitigation measures like guarding need to be improved, while alternative measures should be further explored. And this will facilitate a positive coexistence between golden monkeys and farmers through reduced crop rating and will ultimately improve their conservation. Thank you. I'm very, very grateful to the Fossey Fund and the University of Chester for funding this project, and the government of Rwanda and the Prime Minister of Great Britain. I also thank you for your kind attention. If you have some questions and comments, you are very welcome.
Well, a big thank you to Eric and Honorine, Winnie, and Tara for excellent presentations. We do have a bit of time for question and answers, so I encourage those in the audience to either use the raised hand function or type a question into the chat.
Bert, we had one, I think, for Winnie from Paul, and his question was, given that increased temperature and rainfall were found to increase stress in the gorillas, what are the expected future changes in climate in the area?
Yes, that's a very good question. Unfortunately, like everywhere on the globe, we expect an increase in temperature of 3.6 Celsius, and we also expect that the dry season will last longer. And in terms of rain, we expect, or it is expected, that rainfall will be more extreme events, so it will be less evenly distributed over the year. So we may face scenarios where gorillas have to deal with higher maximum temperatures and also longer periods with higher temperatures, but also with periods where we have very heavy rain. And because these gorillas cannot go any higher, they're already on a island, a forest island, it's really impossible to really escape and go up to be exposed to colder temperatures. So, but what are the long-term consequences? We have to investigate it in more detail. As I mentioned at the very end, it's what we want to do. We have a PhD student coming who will investigate more what the extremes of really high temperatures and low temperatures, what it means to the physiology of the gorillas. And that's a PhD student is going to start very soon. So we hope to get a better insight, a more detailed insight what it means in the long term for these gorillas.
Thanks, Winnie.
Mm-hmm.
So Jennifer, there is a question in the chat for Eric, and also Molly's got her hand up. So why don't you, I can ask the question to Eric here. So Eric, are there population studies on the golden monkeys currently, and how are they doing? Are they doing well inside the park?
How are they doing inside the park? Oh, I think there are studies going on the golden monkeys, either in this population of the Swati, and also in the Virunga National Park. There is also studies going on. As Tara mentioned, it's now 20 years ago we started studying the golden monkeys. So they are doing well in the park, though there is a challenge that they depend mainly on bamboo, I mean in the Volcanoes National Park, and currently a study suggests that the bamboo shoot they like most is decreasing in quantity. So there is need to investigate more how the trend is in the future to see if they still continue to do well. But actually the population is doing well and stable.
Thank you. Thank you. Molly, you want to ask your question?
Sure, thanks, Bert. I wanted to speak because I first just wanted to say congratulations to all of you. I mean, what you're doing is amazing, and to see what you're on the verge of doing is just extraordinary, seeing that facility and all of the wonderful people you have involved here. So thank you so much for sharing this with us. And I had a question for Winnie. You may have published this, but I just wanted to know more about the infanticides that you noted on one slide. And how those are occurring when group membership is changing. Do you know which who is committing the infanticides and which females are more likely to have their infants targeted? Anything along those lines would be fascinating.
Yes, so because we are monitoring the habituated groups every day, so we have teams going every day to protect them and collect these long-term data, we often know who commits the infanticide, and that often or usually happens when either two groups encounter each other and infants get in the middle of it, and sometimes also when they get surprised, or if a group interacts with a solitary male, which are very desperate to get females out, and it's a strategy of males to attract females. May sound a bit counterproductive, but it's what males do to show that you're not safe in that group. You're safer with me. I'm stronger, and so we often see who commits it because we observe these interactions or can reconstruct which group has been interacting with each other. Then we only know which group were involved and not exactly who committed the infanticide. It's now calming a little bit down. So it seems like within the last years, there's some indication, and it's a paper which we just about to submit for review, that in the area, the groups have spread out a little bit and it's calming a little bit down. So that these groups found a bit more their own space, and infanticide might go down a little bit again in the area where we studied the gorillas. Terry, you want to add something?
Yeah, just if I could. Thanks so much for that, Winnie. And Molly, we did publish this in 2020. It was this paper called Violent Encounters. And basically we're able to show, the population growth rate went from being over 5% to down to just over 1%. So it's still positive, but it declined dramatically. And we were able to show that about almost 60% of that was a result of infanticides. So it had a very significant effect on the overall population growth rate. And then the paper Winnie just referred to, we've now been looking at, well, what's accounting for that other 40%. And what's really interesting is Winnie showed that graph with all of the female transfers that were happening, all of those black lines. And definitely females doing these increased numbers of transfers is dramatically slowing down their reproduction as well. So there's a definite cost to them of transferring between groups. So it's really fascinating. And because, again, it's one of the real values of spreading out the research to look at more of the population, because we really have only been seeing what's happened in this one little subset. And the rest of the population is still continuing to grow now at quite a high rate. So we're wondering if we will see these kind of downfield effects or downstream effects in the next couple of years in them.
Wow, very interesting. Thank you.
One other thing too that Eric mentioned that so the golden monkeys are super interesting in Volcanoes National Park because they eat almost exclusively bamboo. And we do have one of our Rwandan colleagues who is involved in habituating them he's just about to finish his PhD on the golden monkey population. And one of the projects has been to put out the first population level recommendations that they're submitting to IUCN. So we hope to have an IUCN document for the golden monkeys. He's comparing them both in Volcanoes National Park and in Gishwati, where there isn't bamboo. So really radical differences in their diets in those two locations that aren't that far apart, and then trying to see what implications that has for other elements of their life history.
Yeah, thanks for those insightful answers. That just a comment following up on Molly's observations, that seeing the new facility, the new center is so exciting. That the Dian Fossey Gorilla Fund and the research you've all been doing in Rwanda over the past few decades has been incredibly impressive. And I can only anticipate that this new facility will be able to even enhance training of local scientists, and having the physiology labs, the enhanced lab work done in Rwanda is quite exciting. That it's hard for me to imagine that you all doing even better work, but I think that more work is available in the future for you. So I'm real excited by the new center.
We are too, definitely. Very excited.
Bert, I think we have maybe just one last question from Paul. Paul, do you want to come off of mute and ask your question? I think it's for Eric, probably.
Yeah. Am I? Hi. Again, like everyone's saying, just the amount of work and effort for primate conservation you guys are doing is just truly remarkable. I mean, if it, you guys will save the gorillas. So I thank you. One question I had for Eric, I've been involved a little bit with crop rating with primates in Nepal. And I was just wondering, are the crops the farmers producing, are they for mostly for family consumption, or are they for to sell in a market? And if they are to sell in a market, is there any way to encourage farmers or to develop new markets for other crops, perhaps that the monkeys are less likely to consume?
Thank you, Paul, for your good question. Yes, we look at that. The crops the golden monkeys are raiding on are mainly potatoes. And these potatoes are for both staple food for families and for market food. So they do play a double role. So they are used for market and for family to make some money out of them. So trying to find alternatives, I think, can be a next step to see if it can reduce the conflict, because they love potatoes too much. If you can find an alternative that can be a staple food and also a source of income for the families, I think that would be a next step, and can also be part of the park extension project and a buffer zone of crops that from which farmers can also make money out of them.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Well, I'll just take a moment here again to thank the speakers, Eric, Honorine, Winnie, and Tara. Thanks for sharing time with us today. That we've all had a wonderful opportunity to learn about all of your efforts, from the golden monkeys, the physiology work on the gorillas, Honorine's really interesting work on the variation and feeding behaviors across the range for the mountain gorillas. That I know everyone in the audience, I'm sure, feels the same way as I do right now, that I really feel fortunate and lucky to have been able to spend this last hour with you all. So on behalf of the American Society of Primatologists Conservation Committee, just a big, big thank you. We have recorded this session. We'll have it up on our YouTube channel. I was going to say Facebook, but that's not right. YouTube channel here in the coming days. So again, thanks to everyone for spending some time with us today. And good evening, good afternoon, good morning to everyone that's here. And we'll catch up with you all sometime soon. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.